Welcome everyone to The Rift. I am your co-host, Jeremy Culver, aka Darsay.
And I'm Gloria, aka Kairu.
Kyle, we have taken a little while off, of course, through the holidays and it being preseason. There's just not a ton to get talking about, but of course we are nearing the start of the spring split. Wow, I can't even believe it's spring split already. And so things are about to get underway. We already talked about the rosters when it comes to things over in NA, but now it's time to talk about things across the pond over in Europe. But before we get into all of that, as always, we start the show with Kyle. How have you been?
I've been good, as you said, during the holiday season. Pretty busy, as always, family and whatnot, but it was good for the most part. And as you said, now we get to talk about these LEC rosters, which some of them will know. Some of these players will look at numbers and try to figure out what how they did previously before they actually were bumped up to the LEC.
Yeah, and that's I guess I actually want to start there real quick just to talk to you about it. Is, of course, with North America, there were a lot of veterans that we saw and a lot of imports, but rosters pretty much stayed with people that have been around the scene that we know fairly well, or only had a few people that are new to the scene and we're getting an idea of what it's like in North America. Of course, they have played somewhere else. While it seems with Europe, they went the opposite approach of investing in more young or newer talent, especially people that have never played in Europe at least. They've played maybe in other regions or leagues that are smaller or not as well known. And so, Kyle, I want to start there in just talking to you about, of course, we're seeing a contrast between North America and Europe. Europe did the same thing last year. Do you see this as any sort of positive or maybe beneficial in Europe's hands when they're doing this versus NA's continued tried and true way of going for veterans, going for imports?
Yeah, I believe there's two things to look at here. First off, I think it's good that you're able to see younger talent, some teams, players that's been in the system for a while, especially with all the different regions they have over there. I mean, Germany has its own league. Germany. Over in France, they have their own league. There's a bunch of leagues that have their own Masters League, and so there's a lot more players cycling in to their system, a lot more players to look at that are younger and up and coming that you can choose from. The second thing that could be part of the reason you see this more in the LEC is contract-wise as well. They just don't spend the money that NA does. The LCS, obviously, look at Hooney's contract and what have you. There's $1 million contracts. You have somebody like Wild Turtle, yes, a good player, and the way his contract was structured, he's supposed to be making, I think it was $700K this year, where you look at somebody like Reckless, a huge name, that might be making that or a little bit less because EU just doesn't pay as much as what they do over there. At least what I've been looked at and watched through and what have you. Mm-hmm. But I mean, you look at that Reckless towards Wild Turtle and think of name wise and everything else, you'd be thinking Reckless would be getting paid a ton. But for veterans that want to get paid, they're going to go to NA, where the younger talent, we were like, LEC would just be like, all right, young talent, let's see what you have and let's keep building from that.
Yeah, and you kind of hit part of my point on the head there, which is in years past, it has been widely known that, of course, the money is more prevalent in North America when it comes to teams and what they're willing to spend versus over in Europe. The money is not as prevalent, or at least teams are not wanting to spend as much money. So contracts are typically smaller versus what you're seeing in North America. Of course, that's why there is the catchphrase "paid by Steve" as you look at the contracts that are going on over in North America, and that's why you also see teams wanting to, or players wanting to come over to North America. And there's even been comments before. I don't remember who said this, but basically, if I wanted to just make money, I would go over to NA and soak up the money, where like they want to compete in certain regions because they feel the competition is better or higher versus just making a lot of money and then going over to North America. So that is correct. But I will say, we've talked about it before about how North America needs to do this, and I think we even mentioned this in the last podcast, is North America needs to find a way to grow their own young talent and be successful with it. And we pointed to Europe as that example of saying, you look over at Europe and what they're able to do with their young talent and what they're able to make out of that young talent and the competition level that comes out of that young talent. North America just doesn't seem to be able to do it or wanting to do it. And I don't know which one is the case, where Europe does it regardless. And I see it as a benefit for a couple of things. The first one is, if you bring in young talent, then the older talent, the veterans, don't feel as comfortable as their spot is secured. They know that there is a young blood who's wanting to be successful and succeed and make a name for themselves, always behind their back. And I feel like that makes the veterans over in Europe have to strive that much more to keep at the level that they want to be at, and of course be on a team. And then on top of it, it of course is a great filtering system. Of course, as you named it, the Masters League makes these younger talents have that competitive scene, pushing them into the LEC, and of course then from there they are able to flourish or be successful, and we see those competitions happening within each team. Now, I will just point to one team that, of course, didn't make any changes, and I would say at the same time hasn't really done anything with like young talent besides, of course, one person, and that would be Perks. But their whole team, G2 Esports, has been signed. They were young talents somewhere else, of course, Caps being with Fnatic, Wonder when he was with Splice, Mikix with Splice, and Yonkos with Rocat at the time. They were young talents there, but they were signed as veterans towards this team to make this super team, as they called it. And of course, the team saw a lot of success last year, almost won Worlds, failing, of course, in the final match. That may be the bucking of the trend, so to speak, with G2 Esports, but everyone else has always gone with these younger, not known names and grown with those. And I do see it as a benefit, and I wonder if this is going to be, again, a continuation of that, of new names, new people, new blood, and we're going to see the LEC continue to push to be more successful than NA because they're willing to try this. And I hope it's not the case only because I'm a North American fanboy. Of course, I live here in North America and really like this. But I continue to love what I see from the LEC doing this, and I think it's going to be beneficial for them, again, as it was last year.
Oh, yeah, no, you pretty much, explained that pretty well. Like you said, it's just having that, as you said, the benefit of having so many different options of the younger talent to bring them up, build them up. It's amazing. And over in NA, it's just they don't care about the academy. I mean, it's there, but and then when it comes to actually looking for other players, it just feels like NA is extremely lazy at actually looking at players themselves and not just numbers, not just stats. Like, oh, hey, this guy has a KD of this, and his average gold is this, so he must be a good player. When in reality, the guy that may not have the greatest numbers is actually the much better player. Like he knows how to play the map. He he's just a very mechanically gifted player. Just there's a lot more to players than just their numbers.
Yeah, like you're saying, he might be the guy that's the better team player that works better in the team aspects versus this hyper carry, solo queue player. So let's now kind of talk about these teams. And the reason I wanted to start there is, of course, as you said earlier, and for the listeners out there, is there's going to be a lot of names on here that Kyle and I are going to be unknown to us, and so we're going to have to look up their numbers, or we'll basically kind of skip that player, talk about them really quickly, but talk about just the team as a whole, because again, there are so many new players out there that we're just not going to have a lot of background, a lot of information on. But I see that as a good thing. So when we skip these players, or if we don't talk about them too much, doesn't mean that we are ignoring them or we think they're a bad player. It's just we don't have that kind of history with them. So if you're okay with it, let's kind of start with the first team, and we're going to do, of course, the Kings of Europe to start, even though they didn't have any changes, and that's G2 Esports, okay? So they had a very, very successful 2019, of course, winning both splits, winning MSI, and finishing runner-up in Worlds. So, of course, the team doesn't make any changes. Kyle, in your opinion, do you feel that's a good thing, or do you feel that could end up hindering them in 2020? What's your thoughts?
No, I think it's a good thing. I mean, they know what they have. They know they are the best team in Europe. Everybody else is playing catch up, and that's what it amounts to. Everybody else is playing catch up. They're the Golden State. Well, they are the Golden State Warriors that was but everybody was trying to play catch up to them. It's always Golden. Who's it going to be? It's Golden State, and then who? Because it was just such another level, and that's what it is right now. They know what they have. I mean, they made it to the finals, but all dynasties come to an end, and I'm not saying it will this split or summer split, but I think with other teams getting a little bit better and stuff, but it's so hard to stay at the top that eventually teams to consistently keep winning like that, it's gonna start to damper a little bit. But for the most part, right now, you have to say they're still the best. But I wouldn't be surprised that there's a little bit more fight out of these other teams this year.
Yeah, I will say, as you kind of said, it's hard to stay at the top, and it really takes a different kind of mindset to be that team that stays at the top. Because, of course, when you are the best, sometimes you get complacent, and you slowly will fall back to earth because everyone else is catching up, and you just are maintaining. I do think, if I'm going to say anything about these players, I do think these are the players you would want to have that are on top, because all of them are wanting to stay the best, and they may be cocky. Of course, we already know Perks' cockiness is very extreme. Caps, to a certain extent is kind of extreme. Yanko's somewhat. But anyway, their cockiness doesn't mean that they stay complacent. They continue to strive to be the best. I will say, there was a quote that I saw. I think Thorin put it out as part of one of his most recent videos. I didn't watch the video, so I'm not going to say what he said in there. But the quote was something along the lines of avoid staying the same when you can upgrade. Something along that lines. And I look at this team, and of course, yes, they are the kings of Europe. Right now they are technically kings of the West. Excuse me. They dominated North America when it came to international play, and they did great, amazing in Europe when it comes to the finals and such. But I look at this team and I'm like, is there any way you can upgrade this team? Is there any spots that could potentially be better or work better? And as you already know, we've talked about it before as well, is you don't always want to have the best like solo queue or best just laners. You want somebody that really works with the team. But I still look at that top lane. And that's the one spot that I still feel like G2 could have upgraded in some form or fashion to work with whatever they wanted to do. Because, of course, there is, always that next level. And using your example of Golden State had already won a bunch of or two titles, if I remember correctly. And then all of a sudden it was like, let's add Kevin Durant. They were already the best. They could have kept the same. They could have stayed the same. And they were like, there was still a way to improve, and they chose that way. Or, of course, Kevin Durant went to sign with them. So I look at it of, could they have still upgraded? And I do think that top lane might be it. Of course, the other spot, it could be the support's role, is maybe the support could have been changed a little bit, and maybe that pushes them just a little bit higher than what they were before. But I do feel that it's kind of one of those things, if it's not broken, don't fix it. And right now, it doesn't look broken, but we'll see when it comes to the split because, of course, preseason happened, patch changes happen, players, change how they play, metas change, and does this meta continue to fit this team? We'll find out, but I do still see them as the top dogs in Europe, and that everyone else is having to try to play catch-up.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And as you said, with the changes and stuff, not only do you have patch changes, you have map changes. So it's going to affect the way that they play. Obviously, they have all this time to adjust, but with the new Drakes and the effects they do, and if you get 4 of them, you get that upgrade for your team. So there's a lot of things that are definitely going to affect the way that these teams play. And as you said, depending on metas and what have you, I mean, some players don't adjust as well as others, and we'll see if G2 can keep it up.
Yeah, so let's go with the second team, and I'm going to go with this team just because I feel that, of course, for most people, they would see these guys as the next team in line, and they did finish, of course, second last year, is Fnatic. They had some changes. Again, a team that I would say similarly, almost to an extent of wasn't broken, didn't need to fix it, but of course changes still happened. And whose part were the changes, whose part weren't the changes, who knows. But Fnatic makes one main change, 2 technically if you count the coach. Self-made now in the jungle over Broxa, and Mithy as the coach instead of Young Buck. So Kyle, which change do you think is more beneficial?
I love the self-made move. I love self-made. He's a really good player. Honestly, as much as I think Brox is a good player, I think it's an upgrade. Personally, I think self-made is actually a better player than Broxa. Overall,
wow, surprise.
Yeah, and I'm a pretty big self-made fan, but I really like the move, especially with him and Nemesis together. I think that's a really good combination. They played together previously, and now that they're back together, I think that can really help this team. But at the same time, it'll be interesting to see Mithy going straight from player to coach, and there's not that gap of trying to somewhat, learn or slowly get to that point. But Mithy, though, is a really respected person over in the LEC. A lot of people really like him. So it'll be interesting to see this team and the players how they deal with Mithy being their coach now. Reckless is known to be pretty hard-headed. Nemesis kind of has a voice of his own. I mean, it's part of the reason why everything started breaking down to, at least what I've heard. So it'll be interesting to see how they handle Mithy and Mithy handles them.
I will say first, you already know I'm a huge self-made fan as well. I loved SK Gaming with him on that team. I think their first match in the LEC, I texted you, I think, right away, and I was like, man, I love SK Gaming and self-made. So I really like the self-made move. I don't know if I would per se say he's better than Broxa. He definitely plays a different style than Broxa, but he may be a better fit for this team simply because of what you said. Self-made played with Nemesis before. They did very, very well on Mad Lions when they played there. Of course, they were a great duo They get separated. Both play fairly well, I will say. But I think having them back now, you already know that synergy is there. And so that's a great fit for that team, especially if Broxa was the one who first chose to leave, or if it was Fnatic saying, hey, we're going to move on. Whichever one that was, definitely getting self-made, I think, is a great pickup. And then I'm going to look at it a little different with Mithy. I don't know how he fits with this team per se, but what was like the biggest thing that Mithy was credited for over the course of his career, very similar to Lemonation, which is his planning and the way that he plans the game and the way that he controls himself during the game. That is, I think, going to be the strongest point for Fnatic, is at least prior to coaching. I never heard that about Young Buck. When he played professionally, I never heard anyone say anything about, oh, Young Buck's planning or pregame preparations are, outstanding. No, it was always Mithy and Lemonation, especially Lemonation with his book. Mithy, that was always the thing. And so I think that's going to be a great thing to have, especially when you look at this team. And I know Bwipo's been playing for a little while now, but when you think of veterans or people who've been in the league long enough that can kind of figure things out, Reckless and Hylissing are like the only two. You kind of still think that with the young faces of Nemesis, Selfmade, and in my opinion, Bwipo, they still might need that extra guidance with preparations and planning when it comes to the maps. And I think that's where maybe Mithy will benefit them. It will be interesting to see how it works because, of course, Young Buck was very successful during his time. So does that change? Now that it's not Young Buck, does the team falter some? And we might see that in the early games. It'll be more important. How does the later part of the split and into playoffs play out? Because, of course, every new team usually struggles a little bit at first, because they're still working out kinks, working with each other. It's, does those stumbles continue to happen as the split goes on? We'll see if they even have those bumps. But that's my thought on the Mithy pickup. But again, I think Selfmade might be a better fit for this team versus Broxa just because of that synergy with mid lane.
Oh yeah, definitely. And where do you see Reckless at right now in his career? How much more do you think he has left?
I personally think he has a lot left, but I do think it is probably similar to the case. Let me say this first, because I know that we're going to get comments and I'm going to get bombarded when I say this. Is not to the exact level, but I do think it is similar to a Sneaky situation with Reckless, where they have a lot left to play. Like they could play for a long time, and they're still really good. Their level of play is still really high. But do they bring that that carry aspect that you want out of that bot lane, out of the ADC role? That's where I'm not for sure. Because, of course, early in Reckless's career, he could always just single-handedly carry a game. And Sneaky, to a certain extent, especially early in his career, could do the same. And it has been, said for many splits now, for Sneaky at least, of, he's still a great ADC, but he just can't carry the game anymore. The other ADCs have caught up. Reckless, I think, can still do it at times. But again, the other ADCs have caught up with him. And that's the thing, is how much does this team help bring him back? I don't know. But I do still think if I'm looking at the ADCs in the LEC, I would still put Reckless at top 4. And that's all I can say at the moment, because it's hard for me to decide who's higher, because, with Misfits in not this most recent split, but I think the split before, I would put Hansama as number 2, and Perks, when he first was ADC, I think I said to you that I saw him as like middle bottom because like those role swaps never really work, and then Perks did
Uh-huh.
really great at
Yeah.
ADC. So then it's like, okay, well, like, is he actually number one? Personally, right now, I would say yes. Um, so, but again, like once you get after that one spot, which again for me, I think it's Perks. It's hard to say where the other ADCs fit at the moment, but I would at least still put Reckless at top 4.
Yeah, and as you said, it's one of those things where guys like Reckless and stuff, they've been in the league for so long that they've hit that plateau, like their peak. And I mean, it's hard to see them doing more, any better than where they're at now. So they don't have that like unknown, even higher ceiling. They're kind of where they're at, and that's where they're always going to be.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Let's move on to the next team, and I'll start with it when it comes to the discussion. And this is, of course, the actual runner-ups for the playoffs, and that is Shulk. So Shulk made some pretty big changes. Of course, Otawame is still in the top lane, but I'm going to skip the jungle for a second because I want to keep the hype going up for, the god. But we'll skip that for a second, and we have, Abadage in the mid lane, of course. Forgiven is back after his time in the military and is playing for Shulk. And then you have Dreams stepping in for Shulk in the support role for Ignar. And then, of course, you have the god himself, God Gilius in the jungle. So first, let me start with, I really like this team until you get to God Gilius. Like, until you get to Gilius, Gilius is the one person that I just instantly saw it, and I laughed so hard. And it was, the viewers don't know this, or the listeners don't know this, but it was, if you remember correctly, they announced this right after we finished recording our last podcast. And it was, we ended the podcast, I looked on Twitter, I saw it, and what did I say to you? I was like, oh my God, God Gilius is back in the LEC. And I just don't see that as a good option. He is so hit and miss every time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those things where, again, there are times where he looks like a god, like he's God Gilius. That's why he got the nickname, God Gilius. But then there are times where it is like, what the heck is this guy doing? How is he still in the league? And I know there are players that we have discussed about this before, but like, he is the peak when you think of that. When you think of a hot and cold player, that is Gilius. And and I feel there has to have been better options. I don't know, but I do feel it's a disservice for this team. Hopefully, Gilius proves me wrong, because I do like Shulk, because I like Forgiven, as you already know, and I love Otawame. The rest of the players, I will say, I don't really have like a feeling for, or any kind of fan base for, but I just don't know what Shulk thought bringing Gilius in, and again, hopefully it proves me wrong, but I would not be surprised if he spends this one split, maybe even not even the whole split with Shulk, and they move on, because he's so hot and cold, and it's just, there's other options out there.
How long before Gilius and Forgiven start throwing hands? That's the question. That's the question, because, man, you got two guys with that like to talk, and that could be a blow up waiting to happen here pretty early on in this spring split. But as you said, Forgiven, this dude's such a talented player, and not just in League, in anything he plays. In anything he plays, he's always top ranked, no matter what it is. MMO, shooter, just anything. I mean, he was high up in Overwatch. He was high up in what was it, Dota and Kings of the North, and I forgot what the other games were, but anything he played, Counter-Strike, I think even, he would just climb the ladders like it was nothing. He's just a super talented player in general. and went back to league, and what did he do? Instantly climb that ladder and get up towards the top. I mean, he's just extremely talented. I'm be interested to see him and Dreams together. Forgiven, I believe, picked Dreams. He wanted Dreams to come in and play with them, so he's playing with somebody that he wanted. And I mean, Otawame, we know what he is. He can be dominant, and you get those games like, oh, Odo, what are you doing? Don't do that. But and then, like you said, Gilius, man, he's gonna come out one game, or not even a full game, a half a game, and look like a god Gilius, and then suddenly ints the rest of the game. So who knows with Gilius and what he ends up doing. Overall, though, Shulk, the team seems like it could be all right, but I don't think they're going to hit the top 4 per se, but they'll be in that middle of the pack.
You think they fall from runner-ups to middle of the pack?
Yeah, I think there's having G2, Fnatic.
Don't reveal the other teams yet.
I'm not going to reveal the other teams, but there's one other team that I like at 3 and 4, and there's another team I have more upside on.
Okay, so you have them almost 6. Wow, that's a far drop. I will tell you, I think they, in my opinion, they are maybe top 4. I don't know. I don't think this team qualifies because I still think they're a really good team. Especially because of that bot lane, and Otawame is such a force in the top lane that I think this is a good team. I just don't know what to say with Gilius yet, and that's where right now I would still say even with that they're top 4, but we'll see once the things start rolling where Gilius goes, what he plays, and if the team even keeps him, and that'll of course change how my perspective on them. But on paper, I still think that this team is fairly good, and I'm gonna have them top 4. Well, let's go to the next team, and in my opinion, I'm gonna go with this team just because I'm really interested in them. So let me first start off with this, which I didn't realize this until now. And I'm looking at this, the standings. After our top 4 teams of last year, every team had a losing record. Every team. Only the top 4 had winning records. So we're going to go with that third team that had the winning record. And at the same time, we are going to say goodbye to that team that had the third record because they are no longer in the league. It is now Mad Lions instead of Splice. Mad Lions have taken the spot for them. And yes, they were the 4th team with a winning record. All the other 6 teams had losing records, so that was interesting. I didn't realize that. And Kyle, this team basically is an overhaul, which is strange for a team that went to Worlds and qualified for Worlds. Of course, didn't have a good showing at Worlds, but still, they qualified for Worlds and had a complete overhaul. Only one player remains on this team. I know some players, of course, just switched teams anyways. Some retired. It's a number of things. It could be completely out of Mad Lions' control how the team shaped up, but it's a whole new team. So we have Arome in the top lane, Shadow in jungle, Humanoid back in mid lane, Karzi in bot, and Gistic as support, and they even changed the head coach with Mac. So Kyle, I know that this is one of those teams we talked about at the beginning of the show. There's a lot of new names that we are not familiar with, but
yeah,
let me just ask first before, and then you could of course go from here how you want to break down the team is. What is your thoughts about the team basically doing a complete change after qualifying for Worlds last year?
Well, with this tends to happen though with teams that rebrand itself, and it's a rebranding of a marketing thing to try to get more revenue, and the brand itself for Mad Lions is a little bigger, and they wanted to diverse themselves. Mad Lions, I believe, is a Spanish.
You are
was
correct.
that?
Yes, Spanish.
Yeah, a team. So they're trying to add some more diversity in the LEC and some kind of, another fan base to watch a little bit more. So, and as I said, a lot of times when you see org changes, you see blow ups like this because you don't know what the org's going to bring in. You don't know how the money is. You don't know what the players want. You don't know if players want to, convert over or have the free. And a lot of times they're like, all right, listen, since we're doing this org change, we'll give you guys the freedom to decide for yourselves if you do want to go play elsewhere or come back with us. So it'll be it's a blow up though. I mean, you keeping what 2 players? Because I mean, technically, Vizzy was played for most of the year too, and
technically, again, Orome played for Mad Lions in the other league. So
yeah,
technically,
exactly.
so if you want to use, a technicality, technically he is staying on the team, but he is still new to EU in the LEC, I should say, and as the top laner for what was Splice. So again, for me, in my opinion or my thoughts, it is a whole new team besides one person that's humanoid. Everyone else is new. Of course, Orome just doesn't have to switch jerseys currently. He's on the same organization as before in a new league.
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of quickly going through these guys' stats, trying to, of course, get an idea of what we could see with these teams. And I will say the guys are fairly good. None of these players stick out and are like, what the heck are they doing? These guys don't have good stats. I mean, everyone has fairly good stats. Gistic on his supports in the Premier Winter Berlin series. So he was in the he also played in EU Masters. Had a KDA of 4.26. Carzzy had a KDA of 6. And the most recent summer playing had a KDA of 3.3, but his team didn't do as well overall. So it's that, of course, changes how things go.
Shadow and Gistic, I believe, both played for Mouse Esports, right?
Mouse Esports was for Shadow. Give me 1 second.
I think Gistic was on there as well.
Yeah, I'm just going to double check that to make sure you are accurate. And looking at it, yes, you are correct. It was Mouse Esports. Career KDA for Gistic is a 4.16. Career for Shadow, which is the person I do want to spend more time talking about. Career for Shadow is a 3.61. So, of course, it just kind of depends on, the changes and stuff. But looking at stats, looking at how things go, I do say Shadow I'm rooting for. I like what I see from his stats. I think that he could be a fairly good player and a great one to join in the LEC. Of course, whenever you join a new team, you never know how it's going to shape up. You never know how they're going to go, and they're joining a new league. You never know how that's going to go because, of course, each league has little differences on how they play and little nuances that are a little bit different than each league. Of course, we all know the differences between NA to EU and EU, of course, to South Korea, LCK, or LPL, things of that nature. But looking at how things go, I like what I see from Shadow. I like his stats. Again, don't have a background with him, so I don't know how he's going to be able to perform on the stage. But I do say Shadow at least is a good pickup. We already know Humanoid is fairly good in the mid lane, so that's at least good for them. And then, other stats, it's looking like they've picked up some good players. It just all depends on, how this team performs on the main stage, and that, of course, is how every team has to be looked at.
In the LEC, too, there's a tendency of a rookie team doing really well. You look at SK in 2015, Misfits recently when Han Sama was new, when their first year came up. Rogue, they did after the bad start, and then once they got the rookies in there, They started blowing up and doing really well. There's always that one rookie team, and is Mad Lions going to be that team? Are they going to be that team that comes out and competes for for a playoff spot?
Who knows? I will say, for me personally, just speaking on teams, I am rooting for Mad Lions. Obviously, I was a Splice fan before, so in my head, in my heart, this is still Splice, so I'm going to be rooting for him. But I will say, just based off of on paper, I think this is a middle of the pack team until I see them perform on stage. So currently, for them, they're one of my middle of the pack teams. Maybe sneak into the playoffs, maybe doesn't, but that's kind of my thought on this team as of now. Anything else you want to bring about this team?
There's not much else I can really say other than humanoid coming back. There's a lot of mixed feelings about him. Some people think he's a little overrated. Some people think he's not overrated. No, he is that good. To see what kind of consistency comes out of him with the new team around him would be really interesting.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And there's always a mixed feeling. He didn't overperform in the last year in 2019, but at the same time, he didn't overperform. So, or did I say what I meant to say? He didn't underperform, but he didn't overperform. That's what I wanted to say. I don't know if I actually said that. But, you're right. We'll see how it actually shapes up. So I want to go with the next team here, and you kind of brought it up. And again, I was very surprised when I saw this. They were the 5th place team in the regular season, and then, of course, in playoffs, they dropped out in the quarters, and that is Rogue. Finishing the year, they had in the regular season a 7-11 record. Get all those slushies you want from 7-Eleven. But now they're coming in with a new team, and you're right, they did have changes that needed to happen for Rogue before they finally started to kind of get their footing and of course, get wins under their belt because they started off really bad. But this team now has Finn in the top lane, who was one of the changes that happened mid-season. You have Inspired in the jungle. Mid lane is Larson, and the bot lane, you now have Hansama. And then in support, of course, it is Vander. So let me ask you this, Kyle, because I know you, at least in the past, maybe you've changed, I don't know, is you were a huge Hansama fan. Hansama is now on Rogue, pairing up with Vander, who is arguably a very good, consistent support. Hansama didn't have the best of 2019s. Do you feel 2020 is different with this new support?
I do. Hansama's, I've heard too, is a really, really quiet player. He's like forgiving and stuff. He just plays. He does what he does. Like he doesn't talk in game. He just focuses on his play. And you bringing him into Rogue with Vander, which Vander's a guy I believe that likes to talk. I mean, so you're bringing him into a better situation. I was hyped for Hansama Gorilla combo. But when you think about Hansama not talking at all and then bring in a guy that has a language barrier, what do you expect? What do you expect to happen? So the more you on paper, Gorilla Hansama sounds amazing. But when you really break it down, it's like, that was probably a really bad idea. So him coming in and playing next to Vander, I really like that, actually. I think it's going to be really – I think it's going to definitely be a step up. I think it's going to be a step up from the previous what they've had. And I'm excited for it. I really like this Rogue team. This is one of the teams I was talking about, top 4. I think this is that team. I really, really like this team. It's Inspired, I think, is – a jungler that's I think can really tear it up this split. I think he's a guy that people really need to look out for.
He's inspired.
Finn, yes, he has. And Finn was a really good player. And I think the biggest flaw about Rogue last split summer and into the playoffs was for some reason Larson decided to int at the end. I don't know if the pressure got to him or whatnot, but he just his last the ending of summer and into the playoffs, he was not the Larson that they previously had, and he dropped off towards the end there. And like I said, I don't know if it was the pressure of trying to make it through. They're young, so definitely watch out for this team. I really, really like this team, and I think it's a team that can take some wins off of some of the top guys here and there during this year.
I do like this team. I just don't know if I'd go that high on them yet. Only for the fact of this team has great young talent, in my opinion. Of course, inspired, as you talked about it. Larson, I think, is still a really good mid laner, and as you said, he just kind of seemed to I don't know, maybe got way too aggressive towards the end and started to int, as you said, and then I like Finn in the top lane. And I love Hansama, and you already know I'm a fan of Vander, so I think this is a really good team. I just don't know how this team's going to perform collectively yet. And that's the biggest thing. If Hansama returns to the Hansama of old, with having Vander there, then I think that this team really has a very high ceiling. If he doesn't, if he kind of performs how he did recently, then I think this team is the middle of the pack. And I still think, as you said, they could take games off. I don't think you can sleep on this team. But it's how do they come collectively is still my question. And then at the same time is who's going to be the carry for this team? Because every team needs somebody to kind of be that focus, that guy that gets the ball rolling. And Hansama can do that in the ADC role. Of course, Vander being there can really do that for Hansama with Vander's play style. But you really need it out of the mid lane. And a lot of this is going to be what is the future development for Larson? Does he continue to improve, or has he hit his plateau and we don't even realize it yet? That's what I see with this team. I just don't have a person that I can put my finger on and say, this is the guy when the games are tough, when the game is close, that you can put the ball in his court and he's going to carry your team to that win. That's my one concern with this team. So that's why they're a middle of the pack for me.
Yeah, and you can, depending on how the meta is, I mean, Rogue already has somebody that's going to be banned off of them. And that's Olaf. Because, man, inspired on Olaf. He's the one that the Conqueror Olaf and whatnot, I believe he's the one that basically brought that into the meta. And, I mean, there's already an advantage for them. You already have a guy that's going to be looked at like, oh, should we ban this guy from him?
All right, let's go to the next team, and that is Team Vitality. They had, of course, a lot of changes as well going in for 2020. So, talking about it, they have the returners are Cabochard in the top lane and Jack Troll in support. But new for them, they have Skeens in jungle, Milica in mid lane, and Comp in bot lane. And again, they changed their coach as well. No more Yamato Cannon, and it is now Duke. So, Kyle, your thoughts on this team heading into 2020?
I don't have a whole lot of thoughts on them. This is one of those teams that out of them all, I wasn't able to completely get enough of a rundown to really know how this team will be. It's another team that's young. It's players that are just being brought up, so it'll be interesting to see how they are. Cabochard, meta. What are we going to get from him? He's been around for a while now. I'm going to miss Yamato's voice.
Oh, of course.
So
how do you not miss that voice?
That's going to be the biggest miss in Team Vitality, but it's one of those teams, though, I honestly have zero idea what to expect from them.
Yeah, you're right. With them having a lot of these guys, I don't know. Excuse me. I don't know who's going to be good, who's going to be bad, where this team's going to fall. Obviously, last year with the previous team, they sat at 6th place. And then, of course, in the playoffs, they dropped out in the first round against Shulk. But, this is a team that could be a sleeper. And I'm just basing this off of what I'm seeing with stats. And you have Skeens in his most recent play had a KDA of 6.6 in the EU Masters play-in. Milica in the Iberian Cup had a KDA of 4.54, and in the EU Masters Summer event had a KDA of 7.35. So obviously that's fairly good to see in your mid laner that he can carry things. We already know that Jack Troll is decent at best, in my opinion, support. Kabashard can be really good in the top lane, but it's really what team around him can kind of keep the ball rolling. That's always the big thing, in my opinion, for him, even though, I've been a big fan of him for many, many seasons now. And then with Comp as the ADC, I just see a lot of hit and miss with his KDA. And I know that we talked about it before. You can't base it all off of KDA. There's other things that go on. But for right now, because we haven't seen them play, we have to base it off of that. And this is just a team I'm not for sure where they fit. For me, at the very moment, if I'm going to just base off of what I see them as a not bottom team, but like bottom tier team. They're a lower.
Yeah.
If I was gonna rank, instead of ranking by where I think they're gonna finish, I was just ranking by overall strengths. I would have them maybe at a C team. I just don't see them as that strong. And if they had that silky smooth voice of Yamato Cannon, they might be a B team. But C is where I kind of see this team.
Yep. I mean, there's not a whole lot else to say about that. Like you said, it's a team that it's question marks. It'll all depend on what they, Jack Trill and Cabochard, the veteran presence in there, can help build these guys into the LEC, the main stage.
Let's go over to SK Gaming. Of course, they finished next, and they had some fairly decent changes, in my opinion. You have I always can never pronounce this name. You have Sacred or whatever in the top role. Trick in jungle. Genax in mid lane. For me, it still says Crown Shot, which I think, right? Yeah, it is still Crown Shot. And then Limit in support. So, Kyle, what is your thoughts for this SK Gaming team? I will say, just really quickly for this team, the only thing I'm upset about is just the fact that they don't have Selfmade anymore. Yep. Only because I like Selfmade and I liked him being on this team. But what is your thoughts?
No, that was the same thing I was gonna say. Their biggest loss was Selfmade. That's honestly a pretty big loss, because Selfmade carried that team quite a bit to the wins they did get. So losing him will be a big issue for them. But you're bringing in Trick, somebody that's played for a while now. He can have his good games. He can have his all right games. We'll see how Genex does consistency wise. See Crown Shot. I'm not the biggest Crown Shot guy. That's it's so hard to say with Crown Shot, because like I said, I'm not the biggest fan of Crown Shot. I'm just like really looking at this team now. I'm not the biggest fan of it. I mean,
I will say I'm not a huge fan of it. I do like Crown Shot. I don't think he's like great, but I do like him. I think he's a solid player. But I think losing Dreams was one thing that's kind of bad for this team. Selfmade is definitely the biggest loss. And then Trick is hard, in my opinion, because like obviously he used to be really good. Last year I would say he was like average. And who knows if that was the team or what it is, but like I don't know where he fits with this team yet, and like if he makes this team better, because again, Selfmade was so good in the jungle that it's hard to say, Trick being good, but does that translate to a better SK Gaming? I don't know. This team I do unfortunately have as like a bottom of the pack team.
Yeah.
I don't see them as being very, very good. And hopefully I'm wrong because I just like the organization of SK Gaming, and I think people are going to be like, Jeremy, you say that about every fucking team that you like this team, but you like the organization. I do. I love certain organizations. I have a fanboy for a lot of the older school or old names of teams, but I just don't see this as being that good.
Overall, though, I will say Trick though stat wise though did really well, but it also benefits that he was on Shulk, a team that has had upset and what have you. So that it will be interesting to see if Trick can recreate what he did in Shulk. So that's the hard part, is seeing there's certain players that will do well depending on what the team is around them. Now it'll be interesting to see how Trick performs on a team that doesn't have the upset and what have you around him to help him out.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying is like I know Trick's stats looked good, but I just felt he was average on Shulk, and so yeah, what does that translate now with SK Gaming, where the team isn't at the level of what you would expect, type of thing. Let's go to our next team, and so we are going to go with Origin. So now Origin. Let me start with, of course, in 2019, first spring split, did really, really well. And, like, people kind of saw this as, man, this is the return of Origin. And then the summer split happened, and this team just stumbled a lot. It was a very big difference. But if I'm going to assess this team, and I'm talking about what teams made the most beneficial changes, I think it is Origin. I don't know where this team finishes. I will say that. I still don't know where this team finishes, but I do think who made the most beneficial changes definitely has to be Origin. So they have Alfari is returning, but they now bring in Cersei as jungle. Nukeduck is returning, but then they have Upset as their ADC, and then Destiny, a new player playing for them. Yes, they just created a character and added him to the team. I will say I like this team. For me, on paper, I think this team is the sleeper team and could easily, in my opinion, be top 4 qualifying for Worlds. That's if they play the way I think they will. That's the huge thing. And of course, I will say it's a huge thing because we always don't know what Nukeduck we're getting. Because Nukeduck is really good, but he also goes on streaks, and he's not a hot and cold in my opinion. He's more so just like he's a very streaky player, where Nukeduck has moments or like 4 games in a row of just really high level play, and then he'll sometimes go like 3 games in a row of just like baffling plays. Yeah, so it's like Nukeduck. It just depends on how his consistency is. But I really like this team personally.
I completely agree. When I talked about my top 4 teams, this is my other team I have up in the top 4. So it's G2, Fnatic, Origin, and Rogue, I believe, are the top 4. And that's why I had the other team that we mentioned earlier at about that 5th, 6th spot, because these are the 4 teams I do like more so. Obviously, I love the Upset pick. I love Upset. He's such a good player. And then it'll be interesting to see how he pairs up with Destiny. They really liked what they saw in Destiny. Obviously, that's why they brought him in. And it'll be, as we said, you can't look at numbers completely, but he did play for Monmouth, which won their league, and they made the Worlds. So, and they finished 3rd in their group. So it was a good showing for Destiny. So that's gonna be a nice. It'll be nice to see how they pair up. Obviously, that's always the key, is how well they will gel. Both being new to this team, as you said, Nukeduck has his really high highs and his really low lows. A player that's really, really good at some games, and as you said, it's always spurts. It's never like a game to game. As you said, it's spurts. Like, oh man, here's that Nukeduck. We're finally getting it, and then suddenly just what are you doing, Nuke? Like, why are you dying like this? And then I've always liked Alfari since he was on Misfits. And overall, I think, though, on paper and just player talent-wise, this roster looks like a top 4 team for sure.
I will say real quick before we move on to the next team, you mentioned him at the end. Alfari is the only one I don't like in this roster.
Really?
I've never been an Alfari fan. I still don't think he's that good. But I just think he is consistent enough, or he doesn't give away leads, or he's never usually the problem, but I just don't see him as like a help. Like I don't see that. I feel like he is a worse version, and this sounds bad because how much I really like this character or this player. God, why do I keep saying character? He is a worse version of Otawame. Like where Otawame,
that's what you view him.
Yeah,
okay.
Where Otawame, again, I think Otawame can carry games, but Otawame is such a force in the top lane. Like he just never, he never. When you look at why they lose, it's usually never top lane got the snowball rolling. Like Otawame always kind of keeps it even keel. Alfari, I feel is similar, but just not as good. Like he just usually you look at it and it's the top lane didn't give this game away because Alfari was there kind of heaving it still. But I just don't see him as anything to brag to your parents about.
If you have upset in them, I'm hoping with a better team around him. With the way I look at Alfari is I'm hoping for the Misfits Alfari. That's what I'm aiming for, is bring that back.
Still didn't think he was that good with Misfits.
With that team, though, it'll be interesting meta-wise, too, on what the meta brings for the top lane. Is it going to be a tankier meta top? Is it going to be carry still top? So that'll have a big say on what happens as well.
All right, so this one's actually a longer episode than I thought it would be. So let's kind of get to the next teams. Misfits going on with a lot of changes. You have Dan in top lane, Razork or Razork. I always cannot pronounce their name. In jungle, Fabivin still there, and with their supports or substitutes, Ronaldo, Bavoy, and Denik. So, Kyle, what do you think of this team? Misfits fanboy.
I don't like Misfits anymore. I'm 100%. I converted over to Rogue.
Oh, okay.
Make it official. I'm following Hansama. What can I say?
You heard it here, folks.
No. Question marks, man. Is Fabivin gonna start or is it Ronaldo? I mean,
based off of what I had seen, Fabivin is supposed to start at least at first.
Okay.
I don't think. Yeah, I hadn't seen anything about that Fabivin wasn't going to start at first. But it might be one of those where it's it based on the matchup, similar to how it was for a little bit with Blippo and Soaz. It could be one of those things, but to my knowledge, Fabivin is starting at first.
Well, what I will say is I don't like Fabivin. So I hope it's Ronaldo. So I hope to see somebody new and see what he can do. But I don't really know what he can do. I'd rather go for the question mark than the one that we already know, especially with Misfits. They need something because they dropped off massive. Maxler just became trash. For a player that was really good with the original Misfits to being the worst jungler in the LEC, it's insane on how much that dude dropped off. He is bad. So they needed, Misfits needed a cleanup. They needed a change. It's just a matter of did they do it the right way. And I've also heard that, I think it's Misfits. I might be mistaken, but I believe it was Misfits looked at it wrong on where they looked at it as, or was it Mad Lions? They waited a little too long in free agency to start to grab people. They're oh, free agency opens up then. And they kind of waited till then to start talking when other people are oh no, people are signing that day. So I don't know. I'm disappointed in this organization what they did. They started out so well, and a lot of players like really liked them, and they just slowly all were torn apart and just dropped off majorly. So they needed massive changes, and they brought him in. It was just a matter of how well these newer players coming in adjust to, like, most of these teams, the newer teams that have the rookies coming up, on how well they adjust to the main stage.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah.
even Dan was very meh.
Yeah. I'm not. Yeah, I'm not thrilled about this roster. I mean, I like Fabivin more than you do, but I do agree. I think it would be nice to see Ronaldo, or Ronaldo, however you want to pronounce it, in the mid lane. Just because, again, we talk about the LEC has grown some young talent, and this is a talent that I think would be nice to at least see what he can offer, what he can do for this team. But you know, if they're going to do, again, this role swap of, you know, sometimes it's going to be Fabivin, sometimes it's going to be Ronaldo, we'll at least get a chance to see him at some point and what he can perform. And of course, that would then be allowed to be, okay, prove yourself, show what you can bring to this team and what you can do. But just overall, I'm just not a huge fan of this team. The one person I am excited to see is Bavoy. I like Bavoy. Want to see what he can do on this team and what he can perform in the LEC. I thought he did fairly well over in the LPL when he was there, and now, you know, he got a chance to, of course, play in. I actually don't even know what this league is. The LLA League. It's a Latin American team. I didn't know that. I didn't know he went there. I just knew when he played in the LPL. I thought he was pretty good in the LPL. And so I want to see what he can do now over in EU. So this is a team I'm keeping my eye on, but I could very easily, just based off of this roster at the moment, see them as bottom of the pack. Like the bottom team.
Like there's C and then there's D and F. They're that D.
Yeah, definitely. All right, and then the last team is Excel Esports. I will start this one because, of course, they have in the top lane Expect back, Casual in the jungle. They've now brought in, or he's going to be there solidified as their mid laner, Mickey, because he was technically with the team last year, Patrick in the bot lane, and no longer Norscarin. It is Tor, or Torre, however he wants to pronounce it. I don't know how he actually pronounces his first name, but that is his first name. I think this is a pretty good team. The question mark that I have for this team is honestly that mid lane. So Mickey, I liked Mickey when he played for Team Liquid for a little bit.
Boy.
Well, no, I did think he was actually fairly good. He was young, so he made a lot of mistakes. But I thought he was fairly good. Then he went to Golden Guardians, and he didn't do too hot. He started off well, and then fell off really badly. There's been issues in the past. Of course, that's why he got kicked off of Team Liquid, of chemistry issues. But now he's kind of getting a chance to redo, himself, re-show, improve himself. And I just don't know what that's going to mean in EU, especially when you look at some of these other mid laners and how good they are. In my opinion, I think based off of what I'm seeing, he is definitely the bottom tier of mid laners, unless he proves himself wise. And then the only other thing that I have a question mark on, because I do think everyone else on this team, including their coach, because they did pick up Young Buck, is good, is Patrick. I think I'm still not a fan of Patrick. Don't think he's very good ADC, and I think that's going to be a sore spot for them, is because I do think that their ADC is going to be behind nearly every game, and it's hard when you're ADC, and of course that's why it's called attack damage carry. They're supposed to help carry your game if they're behind every game.
Yeah, overall, I think Excel's they got better, but they're still not obviously to that point where you can put them like, oh yeah, this team's gonna go against Fnatic, Origin, Rogue, and them. They're still they've improved but not to the extent that they're going to be able to completely compete for that top spot or the top 4 even. Expect, Young Buck loves Expect, so that's why Expect is still there. I'm still not the biggest fan of Expect. We have the issue in NA with our ADCs. Well, LEC, with the exception of Huni, has the issues with Korean top laners. Like I think it's just playstyle too, because jungle, they always expect the jungle to be top side. Where in the LEC, it seems like jungle's towards the bottom side more, bottom mid, and so they don't, when they should be trading and making those massive trades, they don't do that, and they just kind of sit back and let things crumble down to them. And Expect kind of has that issue. Patrick, as you said, he has his moments, but then there's a lot of times, as you said, more so than not, he'll be behind. I kind of wish they kept Mystique. I like him a little bit better than Tor, but that's gonna be interesting to see how he teams up with Patrick. Mm-hmm. I think the biggest thing is Young Buck coming in and what he can do, because Young Buck's easily one of the best coaches in that's around. So it'll be interesting to see how he brings up and builds his team and have some gel and what kind of play style they come. And then with the addition, having Mickey still there, re-signing, as you said, he has his moments. I don't know. I'm not the biggest on Mickey. It'll be interesting to see if he ever takes that step up. But he might be where he's at. Like he just might have hit it already. And consistency wise, we'll see if he can bring any consistency throughout a split.
Yeah, I love the Young Buck signing. So I will start there again. I do love that signing. But this is just it's an interesting team. I don't expect them to be that good. But who knows? This team could surprise me. The only person I really like on this team is I like Norskarin. I do, or obviously Tor now. I like him, but I like Kadril. They're the two that I like. Everyone else,
Kadril's really good.
Everyone else, I'm just kind of iffy about. Patrick, I still think there's better ADC options out there. I mean, obviously, these guys got to be seeing something with Patrick that I don't see. That's why he keeps getting signed to these teams. But I feel like there are other good options out there, and I don't know, what's going on. So we'll see what that means and what that brings for the season. But that is the breakdown of all the roster changes for LEC. So Kyle, before we wrap up this show, I just want to say, or ask you, I guess, is, okay, all the changes have happened and stuff. Just what is your thoughts? What is your excitement heading into the season as it's about to start?
Seeing young talent's always exciting. My most excitement, obviously, is I'm really going to watch that Rogue team. I love that team, and they're young. That's what I love about them too, is that they're young guys that came up and just started playing really well and, fought for that spot, fought for the playoff spot and everything else. And I'm really excited to see if they could truly take that next step and fight for one of the top 2 spots in the league. So it'll be really interesting to see that. And obviously, can G2 keep it up? Are they tired out? Because that's a lot of playing. Think of how much more they play than everybody else in the last how many, splits now. So can they keep it up?
Yeah, I will say, just based off of what we've discussed and stuff, I'm really looking forward to seeing the Rogue team, how that goes. Of course, the Mad Lions team. And then just personally, I'm interested in seeing that Team Vitality, just since it is a lot of new names. But the one thing that I guess I should put it this way. The one thing I'm just upset about, and it's not a bad thing, it's just a competitiveness. Is I still just think though that like G2 Esports is going to run away with this, and it's going to be a similar situation of G2 Esports versus everyone else. Like who's the next one? I hope that's not the case. I do hope it's closer. I hope it's closer only for viewership wise. I hope that doesn't mean G2 Esports took a step back. Like I hope they continue taking a step forward.
Just the other teams.
Yeah, I just hope the bottom teams, the other teams, bring up the competition level and just make it a little bit closer. So that's the only thing I'm a little upset about. But again, that's not a huge issue. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. But that is all that we have for this episode. Remember that the season starts on January 24th. So it's coming. It is not too far away, and I cannot wait for it to go. But for the last time on this episode of The Rift, my name is Jeremy Culver, a.k.a. Darsay.
And I'm Kyle Gloria, a.k.a. Kairu.
Be sure to like the video, subscribe to get notified of future videos and future podcasts that we bring here on the channel. And remember to come and check back because, as always, we'll continue to bring you the news from The Rift.